and of Greta Alfieri, and this was the first time since then that Sensi had talked to anyone about the whole atrocious story. 2 years during which Sensi had never forgiven himself for letting the man escape when he thought he'd had him in his grip, for not having saved Greta, and above all for not managing, during all that intense manhunt, to understand. To see what was right in front of his face, and would have allowed him to stop Riordino before he'd left that trail of blood behind him. The Commissioner took a deep breath. He always knew that sooner or later we'd catch up with him, but he had a plan, and every time we took a step forward, he'd already taken one himself. Sensi hesitated a moment before concluding bitterly, "We've only got ourselves to blame. We always gave him enough time to make that step." "You did nearly catch him, though," said Manara. "Yeah," said Sensi, lowering his eyes, "but only after he had killed 8 more people in the space of a few days." He took another sip of his whiskey before continuing. "We discovered that he had an accomplice who had been helping him, first to escape from the institution he was transferred to, from the high-security psychiatric hospital, then to find a safe hiding place in the city, an accomplice we'd had right in front of us from the start, but hadn't managed to pick up in time. Anyway, the long and short of it is that we discovered he was hiding Riondino, and that he was holding Greta Alfieri hostage there." "Were you and Greta close?" asked Manara. "Nowhere near as close as she and Claps were," replied Sensi slowly, emphasizing each word. "There'd been a very deep bond between them since the time he'd saved her life." He took another small sip. "Claps was with me that night when we all went over there, but the Riondino had already gone. It was probably only a matter of minutes, but we missed him. The house was empty and the accomplice's car had disappeared. It was sighted in Como less than an hour later, with Riondino at the wheel and Greta lying on the back seat as though she was sleeping." "She was already dead," remarked Cristina Manara sadly. "When I did the autopsy, I didn't find any trace of smoke in her lungs." Sensi just nodded and turned his eyes away before continuing. "The sighting wasn't coincidental. Riondino wanted to be recognized. He planned it all out. He stopped at a petrol station and only set off again when he was certain that the manager had recognized him and seen Greta apparently sleeping on the back seat. With cars already on his tail, he took a back road that went through the hills to Switzerland, a narrow road full of bends, and the tarmac was slippery from the rain. It was pouring down that night." Sensi stopped for a moment to suppress the wave of emotion the memories were evidently causing. "He was carrying the corpse of the accomplice he had killed only a few hours earlier in the boot. He fastened him into the driving seat and pushed the car off a cliff, making it look like they'd gone off the road, and then he set fire to the car. After that, all he had to do was walk across the border." Another brief pause, another deep breath. "When we arrived, we found the 2 carbonized bodies, and we had no reason to think that the corpse at the wheel wasn't Riondino. We only found out 36 hours later, thanks to you, when you did the autopsies. By which time it was too late." Sensi's voice seemed no longer able to hold back his anger. "Always one step ahead of us." As though it were actually there before her, Cristina Manara saw once again in her mind the X-ray of the teeth which had proved the burnt body she was examining was not that of Riondino. "And in the meantime he'd got to Liechtenstein and his hoard." "Almost 5 million euros in an encrypted account. And when we finally managed to get to that account 10 days later, it had already been closed and the money had been withdrawn. With all that cash, it wouldn't have been difficult for Riondino to disappear, maybe to some tropical paradise." "Without leaving any trace?" Sensi nodded. "More blood," he said gravely. "Of course, we were only able to reconstruct the chain of events afterwards, but a young Serbian woman disappeared in Wallenstadt, a Swiss town on the lake of the same name, just a few miles away from Liechtenstein and Vaduz. She was a